So once again, I want to welcome everyone to our webinar today. We're going to be talking about the statewide parcel data effort in Vermont. Before we get too far in, I do want to make sure that you can all hear me, and I'm going to do that by asking you to take a look at the panel, the GoToWebinar panel, and look for a little icon that looks like an orange hand with an arrow on it. And if you could click on that little icon, that lets me know that people out there in the virtual world can hear me. Great. Thank you very much, everybody who's clicking on that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start and hope that everyone else that's coming joins us pretty soon. So I'm going to do a PowerPoint that just does an overview of a discussion that has been happening for about a year. I should say a formal discussion. We've all talked about issues related to parcel data in the past, but in the past year we've had, I always seem to have an issue with my PowerPoint right when I start up. Let's try this again. There we go. So for the past year we have been talking about parcel data, but why do we talk about parcel data? Who cares about parcel data? Obviously, a number of different entities use parcel data, so therefore care about it. The towns would be the obvious first group of people that care because they're the ones who create the parcel data. Regional planning commissions who work closely with the towns and perform services for the towns, as well as working on the regional plan itself, use parcel data quite a bit. State agencies and departments, I think, are becoming more and more interested in parcel data actually in the past decade or so, as they realize that it is one of the key pieces of digital information that can help them to do analysis and to look at state programs and the impacts that they're having. Federal agencies, kind of the same thing. I think that they are wanting to use parcel data more and coming up against the realities of the state of the parcel data in various places. In addition, there are a lot of private sector folks that are using and wanting to use parcel data. And although sometimes I know that there are people who don't understand why publicly funded data should be so easily available to the private sector, I will just point out that most of these private sector folks are working for citizens. They're doing work for the citizens in your towns, in our towns, and so we're really facilitating the work that is serving the citizens. So real estate folks, surveyors and engineers, environmental consultants often are doing work for towns actually as well as for individuals, and foresters are again working either for individuals, for towns, for state agencies, all sorts of levels. The obvious way that it's used initially is to make maps, but people, especially with digital data, people can do a lot more than that, than just making maps. And maps in and of themselves are obviously incredibly useful, but the data can also be used by software programs to do analysis of a variety of types. You can ask questions with mapping data, and both visually and not visually you can perform analysis that helps you to answer those questions, or at least provide information to answer questions related to the things I've listed here: economic development, environmental issues, transportation issues, patterns, land use patterns. And then the third use is something that we don't always think of, even though with current use as an example, it's actually one that's not hard to understand. In order to apply for grants, towns often need to describe their town in some way, or maybe describe the types of land that they have in their town, the types of ownership patterns they have in their town. And parcel data can help both individuals and towns participate in programs. So the current use or use value appraisal program being an example, landowners do have to submit maps if they are trying to participate in the forestry aspect of the current use program. And having that parcel data makes it a lot easier to participate, to create those maps so that they can participate. So this is just an example, a particular example of an online system that a consultant has designed for towns as a way to access digital parcel data. And the reason I use this as an example is just because you can see in this one image a lot of different things going on, and so it's just a good example of a lot of different ways that digital parcel data gives you a lot more power. You can do a lot with it. So you can see that we can see a map, and it has a lot of information on it. It has both the acreage, has parcel number, it has dimensions of the various sides of the parcel. It shows you information about the adjacent parcels, shows you information about roads. There's some kind of additional designation maybe going on over here with the hatching. We also have over here in the lower left a direct link to information about this parcel and a picture of the building on the parcel. You can see that there's a number of other pieces of information here, including the address. Up on the right, this is an example where I clicked on the button to come up with abutters, and this just shows that this particular application automatically generates an abutters list, a little mailing list. In the upper left, to the left of the map, you'll see that you have options about what data layers you want to show on this map. So again, this is where the digital aspect of this parcel data makes it a lot more powerful and flexible. You can do a lot of different things with it. This is another quick example to show that maybe to get a little bit into, although it's a very busy map, imagining what types of analysis you can do. So as you can see over on the left here, we have designated downtown overlay with a thick yellow line. It goes around this area. And then the hatched yellow area, which is a portion of that, is showing a downtown historic overlay district. We've got, I believe this is a flood zone over here. I don't have that one open in the legend, but I believe this is a flood zone. Obviously, you have a bunch of different zoning values showing on the map. And then I'm trying to remember what else is on here. So as you can, roads, obviously, there's a waterway, there's a river here. And so just in this one map, you're seeing a lot of different pieces of information, and the parcel data just adds the layer that links it all back to what the many people in the town certainly are most concerned with, which is how does this affect a particular individual's property? How does it affect values? So there's a lot of information and a lot of decisions that you can make based on being able to bring all of this information together. All right, so that's all just about why do we care about parcel data. Moving on to, sort of what's the problem? Like, why are we talking about this as an actual issue? It's because right now the state of parcel data in Vermont, and this is obviously looking at it from a statewide perspective, is that it's inconsistent from one town to another. Both in terms of age, there's some towns have gotten their parcel maps updated every year and have also gotten updated digital parcel boundaries. Some haven't. Some have gotten their maps updated but not the data, and some either haven't even gotten maps updated or don't have maps. A few towns still don't have tax maps. And then there's the content. If you remember when we looked back at the parcel map example, it has both the boundaries, but then it also has the information like the parcel ID number, the ownership information. There can be a lot of other information connected to that parcel, and what is connected to that parcel information varies a lot from town to town. Some towns don't have any information in their parcel data. Some just have their map ID number. I'll talk about what we hope to see in most towns' parcel data in the future and why it matters. And then the other thing is the boundaries themselves don't always line up from one town to another, which on the one hand we can all just accept that and deal with that. On the other hand, for the long term, it would be nice if it was a little bit more of a seamless quilt of boundaries, since the reality is that's how it works. And then the final thing is, as I said, not every town has parcel maps or tax maps, let alone parcel data. So there's the problems from the point of view of many of the people who would like to use this data. So our vision for what we would like to see with statewide parcel data, meaning high-quality statewide parcel data, is that it would be consistent from town to town. And what we mean by consistent is that it would follow the Vermont GIS parcel data standard that was developed by a committee of people representing a variety of backgrounds, municipal folks, state folks, tax department, surveyors, a variety of different people, our Regional Planning Commission folks participated with VCGI on developing that standard. One of the main features of the standard is that it requires the inclusion of the span number in the attribute data of the parcel data itself. And what that allows you to do is not include a whole bunch of information like owner, value, all the information that you would normally find in the grand list. You don't actually have to include it. You can join it. As long as you have that span number in both the parcel data and in the grand list, you can perform a function called join in mapping software. The other thing is we'd like to see every town keep their data current. That may or may not mean every year, but it would mean on some kind of a regular basis, so that you knew that the data that you were using was likely to be as good as it could be for that moment, rather than knowing that it's 10 years out of date, which is often the case. And then I have in italics that eventually we would like to see, and I put it in italics instead of eventually just to indicate we know we might not be able to get everything all at once, even when we do pursue this as a goal. But we would like to see the data eventually be seamless, which would mean that towns could agree on where their town lines are, which I know is not a simple thing and is not necessarily the case, and that the mapping contractors would be willing to kind of work with each other potentially to work out some of the differences. And then the final thing is that it be spatially accurate. We all know that parcel data, parcel maps are not survey quality. They are, even if they were used, even if they were created using survey data, the parcel data and parcel maps that you end up with are absolutely not at the level of accuracy of a survey. And so, we can all accept that it's not that level of accuracy, but overall we should all be striving towards having more accurate maps. And the more accurate they are, the more equitable the taxation that's happening is, if those maps are being used to help determine acreage. So again, we go back to why do we care about all this? So we want to increase the quality of what's available and what towns are using, what the state is using to do analysis. Increase the quantity because, as I said, some towns don't have tax maps or don't have data. Increasing the consistency across from town to town is obviously a benefit for people who are trying to either make maps or do analysis that spans more than one town. So regional planning commissions, state agencies, federal agencies obviously have an interest in having consistency because then they can lump the data together, ask a question across a whole area rather than just within one town. But it is actually, there are benefits to the town as well. The way I see it is that a lot of thought has gone into the parcel data standard, and the towns can benefit from that thought process. In some cases, towns might not know how they're going to use parcel data if they're not really using it now. They may or may not know how the Regional Planning Commission could use it and make maps and do analysis for them. But if the town's data follows the standard, then there is the potential to use it in the future as the town perhaps becomes more knowledgeable about its usefulness or about the questions that they want to ask about their own town. And so then I just have a little list of the types of analysis and the types of topics that we want to do analysis about and that we have questions about. There are a lot of issues that have come up that if we had better parcel data, we'd be able to use it to at least explore the answers, and right now we really can't. And those are things like the current use program. Everyone's asking, how much does it cost? How much of the state does it really cover? What does it look like if you were to look at where all the current use parcels are? That would be a really interesting map to look at, and we don't have quite all the data yet. Looking at things like land use patterns can help inform decisions about regulation, zoning. And then obviously economic development, when we're looking at where we want businesses to be sited, what are appropriate areas for different types of industries. Natural resource health, it's an important tool in figuring out where the natural resources are and who owns the land that has different natural resources on it. And then the final one is related to emergency management and resilience. because knowing the owners of property often helps us to address issues of both response and mitigation, preparation for the future. So, who is it that's been talking about this? I mentioned at the beginning, for about a year, there's been a group of people meeting. And they're mostly state employees, but not exclusively. VCGI, I work for VCGI, Vermont Center for Geographic Information, and we're the state geospatial data warehouse. Right now, we're a public nonprofit. We're actually going to become part of the state again in the spring. Other members include, represent most of the state agencies, the major agencies, Agency of Natural Resources, VTrans, Agency of Commerce, Community Development, Agency of Agriculture, Department of Health, and then we've had the regional planning commissions are represented, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. We've had participation by representatives of the Association of Listers and Assessors and the Society of Land Surveyors. And we do hope to broaden that list a little bit over time. So like I said, we've been having meetings, we talk a lot, and because it's a complicated issue, we do talk a lot, and we keep bumping up against all the issues that I'm sure you all know about in terms of the fact that it's not a simple thing to say, oh, we'll just wave a wand and create consistent statewide data and everyone will be happy. Because we end up talking about both the technical parts of it and the political, pragmatic aspects of it. You know, none of us want to create an unfunded mandate, so then we end up talking about funding options. There are different opinions about whether this should be a state program that is where really it's a state employee running, doing something and coordinating with the towns, or whether it should just be an effort to compile data and to encourage the towns to create the data through their own means. So we talk about a lot of different issues, and I'll mention in a minute what our kind of very tentative scenarios are that we've sort of started considering. One of the things that's been moving forward is that VTrans right-of-way section has a very strong interest in this issue, and they had access to some funds to do a report, to do a study and a report that's being done by a consultant, a return on investment report, which is where they really try to quantify both the benefits of having statewide consistent parcel data and the costs of creating it initially and then maintaining it for several years. And they compare those and come up with a number, and that number represents either yes, this is worth it, or no, this isn't worth it, or maybe you need to redo your analysis. And then the second part of what they are having done by this consultant is an analysis that's called a parcel life cycle analysis, or report will be the result of it. And that is looking at these questions of how do we make this happen? How do we make sure that this is a sustainable effort and a sustainable program of some kind, and what's politically feasible, and what do all the different people out there that have any opinion about this think, and what sorts of information can they provide to come up with a solution. So that company will be working on that, and I'll actually do a few slides just to show you a little bit more detail about that report that they're going to do. And then the final thing is just that in the meantime, VCGI received a grant from a federal granting agency called the Northern Borders Regional Commission, and we've been able to offer a little bit of funding to towns in northern Vermont to do parcel mapping, either for the first time or to improve low-quality data in 14 towns. So here's a little bit of information about that. And I'll mention, although I don't think I even remembered to put it in here, we actually ended up having a little bit of money left over, so we're going to do a second round of funding. So if there are any towns out there in the northern 6 counties, Grand Isle, Franklin, Lamoille, Caledonia, Essex, and did I say Franklin? Did I skip one? Well, the northern 6 counties. If there are towns out there that are interested in participating in this program, let me or your regional planning commission know. I will be putting out information about this pretty soon. It's a limited amount that we have for this second round, about $35,000, I think. And it's a 50-50 match, 50% match. So whatever the total cost of your project, we can give you funding for half of it, and you have to have the resources for the other half. So the current program has 14 towns participating, all working on their parcel data right now. Most of those, 9 to 10 of those, will be done by the end of this year, and 4 or 5 of them will continue into 2015 because they were bigger projects that just need to be spread out over a little more time. And we got a little bit of a late start. But the great thing about this is that all the data that results from this project will meet the state standard and will therefore much more easily link to the grain list than the existing data. So, and there's a map showing which towns are participating. So the map on the left actually shows kind of the status of parcel data before this project started. Green is good, red and white are generally bad. Orange is a little bit unknown because at the time that I made that map, we weren't sure the age of data that was available there. And then the one on the right shows the towns that are participating shaded in. So there's a chance that VTrans will be able to access some money to work on this effort, but in order for that to happen, we really would need to create more of a coalition of maybe state and maybe federal money in order to really do a statewide program. Let's see, what else do I want to say about this? So this is just to mention that something is being talked about. It's still very much in process, and we're not quite sure where it's going to go. And this is really the reason that the return on investment report and the parcel life cycle report are being done. It will help inform this process of deciding whether VTrans might help fund something. It will be, so it's a 3-month process approximately for the VTrans effort, and that's starting pretty much now. And so we're hoping that that will be done by the end of 2014, those 2 different reports. And in the meantime, our group, mostly through VCGI, but also working together, is going to try to continue to work on some of these issues. We're going to update the parcel standard based on all this talk about the data that we've done over the past year. We'll try to improve the data that currently exists by just working directly with towns and mapping contractors and just suggesting, would you be willing to add the span to your data? Just have that be a part of your contract with your mapping contractor. And then we'll keep exploring options and taking in information about how a program might work out. So here's a relatively recent map of the current status of parcel data in the state. And if you're a town, take a look at that map, and if you can tell which town is yours and what year. Again, the green is 2010 to 2015 data, and I obviously included some of the towns that are participating in our program for that 2015 data. Yellow is 2005 to 2009, orange is 2000 to 2004, and red is 1990 to 1999. And white is towns that either don't have data or we don't know that they have data. So if you think that information is incorrect about your town, I'd love to hear from you. And or you should talk to your regional planning commission about providing your data to them so that they can provide it to VCGI. So as I said, I have been communicating with mapping consultants about communicating with their towns about the format of their data and just including the span and a few other technical things to parcel data that don't really involve added expense. So I'm hoping that towns will be willing to consider making those little tweaks to their contract with their mappers. Asking them to include the creation of metadata, which is the information about the data. And then basically making sure that all towns that are willing to let their mapping contractor know that they'd be happy to have the contractor just pass the data directly to VCGI. We're considering evolving from the current model, which is that the regional planning commissions pass the data along to VCGI, and asking the towns and the mappers to consider doing it directly rather than having the RPCs serve as the middleman. And one of the ways I'm going to try to help them with that is to provide a letter that they can then use they can adopt or adapt and use to ask the town permission to do these various things. And as I said, we're working on updating the parcel data standard. We recently did a little internal webinar learning a little bit more about the span and the grand list, because all of us are not necessarily experts on those topics, and yet we're saying that we want to connect to the span number. We want to include the span number, so we realize we need to understand it a little bit better. But we'll just update our standard related to the topics that we've been talking about in this group. One of which is dealing with some of the right-of-way data, the VTrans right-of-way data that is starting to become more and more available as they have been working on digitizing the right-of-way plans and information, and so over time that data will become easier to incorporate into the parcel data. So here are our very rough and obviously not detailed program ideas that we've ended up talking about over time. Number one is basically just something that's totally in state government. A state employee works on collecting parcel boundary changes, and this assumes the data has all been brought up to a level where it all meets the standard and it's all current. So this is sort of skipping over that initial stage and just talking about a sustainability into the future, keeping the data maintained and up to date. So the first model is a state government model, a completely state program, I guess, and where somebody has the responsibility of actually collecting that data somehow, and we've talked about all different ways that that could happen, and editing that state database. Now, in case anybody's wondering, I will point out that all the data that we're talking about is public data. We're talking about it being completely available to everyone. If this was the model that everyone thought was a great idea and that actually happened, probably that state program would send that town's data, updated data, back to it every year, and then that town would use it to either make their own maps or hire a mapping contractor to make their tax maps, just like they always have. The difference would be that the editing of the data itself would happen within state government rather than at the mapping contractor. So the second model is a little bit more similar to what we have now, except that we would hope that we could come up with some state money to, or money that came from a variety of different topics or different sources we'll talk about in a second, but that there would be funding available to go to the towns. Now it might be that every town gets a certain amount of money every year, similar to the way the tax department helps the towns with appraisals. Or it might be that towns that submit data that meets the standard get the money. Or you know, there's a number of different ways you could imagine the funding getting to the towns and what criteria would be used. So who knows what that would be. But the basic idea is that the towns are still responsible for responsible for getting their parcel data made, whether it's that they do it themselves or that they hire a contractor, as most towns do. And notice that the second part of this bullet is that the RPC could manage this, because we recognize that there are towns for whom this is really a capacity issue. This is just too much work or too technical or whatever, and the town just isn't going to do it because they can't. And if that's the case, I think we all acknowledge that the Regional Planning Commission could potentially be the sort of technical help, just as they are now, and could manage the creation of parcel data for towns in that situation if the town chose to use the RPC that way. And the RPC would get funding for doing that work. And then the third option is to essentially do what is described in step one, which is kind of having a centralized process that maintains a single database that then gets shared back out, but pass it all off to a contractor, outsource. And the reason we threw that in there is because that's actually what New Hampshire did. New Hampshire's tax department, I believe, originally I think it was a partnership of their Agency of Transportation and their tax department, but I think it's just the tax department now, pays a university group to take all the parcel data from all the towns in whatever format they provide it. And they have an algorithm that mushes it all together and creates a statewide mosaic of parcel data. So it's centralized, but it's not necessarily within state government. It's run by someone else, just paid for by the state. And then, as you can imagine, the reality is that I suspect the way it will all happen, if it were to happen, is there will be some mix of these. I suspect that I don't think you'd ever see any one of these be the sole exclusive option. So funding options for where are we going to get money? I just sort of threw out the list of all the, maybe not even all, but some of the things that we talked about. General fund, oh, we're just going to, I'm sure the legislators would be happy to just hand us some money, and that would make it a lot easier. But other options that we talked about were additional fees on various things. So perhaps additional subdivision fees. There's some logic to that since subdivisions result in parcel boundary changes, that perhaps an increase in those fees could then be passed along to a program or back to the towns to support parcel mapping. Let's see, an increase in the funds that are currently provided to the towns by the tax department. So that would, in a sense, it would be easy. Just up it by $1 or something, and say, you know, this portion of the money you're getting has to be spent on parcel data, or you're required to do parcel data in this way, but we're giving you extra money. We're giving you more money at least. And some other things that were talked about were wastewater permit, adding to wastewater permit fees, adding a fee on the property transfer tax. Again, there's some logic there, because often that does result in parcel boundary changes, not always. Then there's the idea that maybe all state agencies should just pitch in a little bit from their budget, because, or at least all of those who are interested, or they all eventually will be interested, but those, all the state agencies have an interest in parcel data, so maybe they should all just contribute a little bit. And we are, of course, interested in hearing what all of you think. So I will say that I was actually in the process of making an online survey so that I could have it available today and give you all the links so that you could give your input, when I learned that the consultant that's doing the return on investment life cycle reports is going to be creating an online survey. And I realized, well, that would be redundant, so I'm not going to create an online survey. So instead, I am going to post their link once they've created that survey, and you will find it at this website. I'm just going to get out of here and go over to our website. So here's VCGI's website, and if you go to the About VCGI section, Projects and Initiatives, you'll see a link to the Vermont Statewide Parcel Data Project. So this page is where I hope to keep posting stuff about the ROI and life cycle project as it becomes available. Down towards the bottom, I'll have a link to the survey that they're going to create, and also any other information that they provide that relates to wanting to gather more information from all the people who are interested in parcel data and in a potential statewide parcel data program. I also have a link to that PowerPoint I just showed you right here, and the group that I kept referring to is formally known as the EGC, which is the Enterprise Geospatial Consortium Parcel Work Group. So the Enterprise Geospatial Consortium is essentially a group of state agency GIS folks, that's mapping folks, who get together once a month to talk about how the state can be somewhat coordinated about GIS technology. And so we are a subgroup, a work group of that organization, and it's the Parcel Work Group. And so that also has a web page where meeting notes from all those meetings that I referred to and resources that we collected and talked about are all posted there. So you're all welcome to check that out. All right, so let me just briefly, and I'll also point out that my contact information is over here on the left side of our website, so you can always reach me. I am going to go over to, this is the PowerPoint that the consultant, AppGeo, did for our group and for VTrans to just give an overview of what this project is going to look like. So I just wanted to show you a few pages from this so that everybody understands what an ROI project is. So as you can see, it's to document the value of statewide parcel data in quantifiable terms. So the first thing is to identify stakeholders, and that would include all those different people I named at the beginning of this. It's towns, it's regional planning commissions, it's state agency folks, it's federal folks. So they're going to do an online survey. They're also going to facilitate 3 half-day workshops in different parts of the state, And then the final step is, you can see that they're sort of starting out by just throwing it out there and saying, tell us what you think, then doing a little bit more in depth to give people who are willing to participate in something like this a chance to maybe talk a little bit more. And then the final step is to do what they call the deep dive on key use cases. So they will identify key stakeholders and do in-depth interviews with them to get more in-depth information. And also that's really where they start putting together numbers. Those are the people who are willing to quantify things. Step 2 is this deep dive. So this is talking about what the deep dive part of it, and examples. These are just examples that based on their knowledge of doing similar projects, similar reports in other states. So these are examples of scenarios that would lead them to then talk to specific people and come up with quantifiable aspects of the benefits of parcel data. So tax assessment, validating right-of-way boundaries, support for natural resource management permitting, planning, all sorts of planning, obviously, in regional state programs, and then economic development. And then they take all those things they were able to quantify and they start doing calculations. They come up with what are the costs to creating statewide parcel data. And you might, this question came up at our meeting where they did this presentation. Well, who's really defining the details of what we mean by the statewide parcel data? And that's something that they will actually work out with VTrans and with those of us on this parcel work group to tease out what we really mean. And it will involve looking at our data standard, but also really talking it out. And then quantifying the benefits. And then, I'm not sure what the third bullet here means, potential advantages, increased benefits relative to cost. Oh, I'm sorry. This is they're referring here to something that was relevant in Massachusetts, and I'm not sure it would be here actually. I think this was from looking at our standard. Anyway, level 2 and level 1 refer to the parcel data standard, which may or may not be relevant after we update it. And then the final thing is the actual math, where they come up with this number. So the final ROI calculation literally is a number, and if that number is higher than 1, then the answer is yes. There's more benefit than cost. And if the number is less than 1, the answer is costs are kind of high. Maybe the benefit doesn't outweigh. So as I said, they're planning to complete within 3 months, and they will be identifying stakeholders. So here's the life cycle part of it. So this has to do with the looking at the long-term aspect of this, the sustainability. The idea is that they want to develop a programmatic approach and implementation plan for the ongoing development, integration, and maintenance of statewide parcel data. So what this means is the program management plan addresses coordination and governance of key stakeholders. So who's involved? Who is it that's running this? Who is it that has a voice in this? How do they all work together if they're from different agencies? Because obviously everything I've been talking about is all about all these different people from different agencies and departments. So who's actually involved and in charge? What is the best way to put together such a program, and how is it organized? Funding mechanisms, and then risks, which has to do with, you know, if we find that the legislature does support general fund, we're a line item in the budget now. You know, there's obviously a risk there that it could also just get cut when times are bad. So they will identify all of these things in the report. The implementation plan would include assessing existing technology infrastructure and organizational framework. And I'll just throw in that one of the things that this refers to, just as an example, is the fact that VCGI already exists. Not that VCGI necessarily would be the organization doing any of this, but it is part of assessing existing technology infrastructure that we have a database of spatial data and people that know how to manage it. So that's a good start. And actually that there are all these state agencies that also manage their own geospatial data. So there's a fair amount of technical ability, servers that can hold data, that kind of thing. So that's an important thing when assessing the current situation to figure out what's our capacity. And then looking at the existing data, where are we at with the data and what's obviously required to move it up to a higher level. What would be the technical approach? And then evaluating the burden, which here, this is where they're really estimating the cost going forward. And then reviewing our standards and best practices for managing it all. Okay, and that's the end of that part. Okay, so I think I have done my overview of everything that I wanted to mention. I'll just point out that the Northern Vermont Parcel Data Program has a page too, if anybody wants to check that out. And I don't have anything posted yet about the second round of funding, but this is one of the places that it will be posted if you're interested in learning more about that and checking back. I would love to hear from all of you. If any of you have comments, questions, in your GoToWebinar panel, you should see one that says questions. And if you open that up, it's a place where you can actually type in your questions and they'll come directly to me and I can read them out and share my answers. And also those of you who are on this webinar who are part of the Parcel work group should feel free to speak up if you feel that I haven't covered anything, or also to help answer any of these questions. So, so I'm really interested in hearing from people, particularly municipalities, but not exclusively municipalities, but to hear what you think about all this and what your either hopes or concerns or recommendations or questions, any of that. So hopefully people have questions. I have to give you a chance to type them in. Oh, there's one. I have to open up my question panel. There we go. Okay, so my first question is this just Northern Vermont, or are they doing this for Southern Vermont too? So I probably confused the matter by talking about the Northern Vermont program. What's on my screen right now, the Northern Vermont Parcel Data Program, is just a particular grant-funded program. We got a grant from the Northern Border Regional Commission, VCGI did, and we got that grant exclusively so that we could pass that money along to towns in the northern region. And the reason it's limited to the northern region in this particular program is just because those are the counties that the Northern Border Regional Commission serves, and they're the source of the money. What I've been talking about overall is statewide. So we're not just talking about, with this project, we're not just talking about the northern part of the state, but really the whole state. But we do not currently have a grant program with money available to do parcel mapping in the southern part of the state. Hopefully someday we will, especially if the state takes a while to come up with money. But we do not have money specifically for Southern Vermont yet. Any other questions or comments out there? And just in case anybody's using the little hand-raising option, you don't have to wait for me to acknowledge you. You can just go ahead and type your question into the question box, and it'll just get sent to me. It won't go to everybody. It'll just go to me, and I can read it out to people if it's of interest. Now, see, I don't know if the fact that I'm not getting questions means that I was just so comprehensive in my presentation, or if it's because everybody's gone on to do other things. So I'll wait another minute or two, and then we'll probably end a little bit early if nobody's got any questions. Well, I will finish up by saying, pointing out, oh, there's a question. So that's nice. One person said I was comprehensive. That's good. When are the results expected from the survey, asks Pat. That's a good question, because I think the survey is going to be an early part of their process, but I'm not absolutely sure whether, actually, if Kate is still on here, she might be able to answer that. I don't know whether they're going to be releasing the results of the survey publicly, as soon as they get them. Okay, Kate is one of the people who's going to be working on this project. She said they plan to complete the survey in time to share the results at the workshops. Okay, so they will be sharing the results. So the survey is one of the first things that will happen in their project, and then remember the half-day workshops will be organized after that, in sort of a little bit later in the fall, and they want to have the results from the survey to share at those workshops, which means they will be available. That sounds like within a month or so, probably after the survey is completed. Oh, good. And she can make it, so AppGeo is saying that they can make the results available on the VCGI website. So that's great. If you keep looking back to our webpage, you should see whatever's available. Okay. Anybody else with questions or comments? Don't hold back if you have opinions about the idea of a state program or who should manage it or anything like that, because I would love to hear from everybody. So someone else who's participating on the webinar asked, will we get invited to the workshop? And then Kate, I think at the same moment want to ask if people are interested in attending the workshops. So I would say I will, unless people protest, I will probably pass along the information about who participated in the webinar today to AppGeo, the company that's going to be doing the studies, and that way they know that these are people who at least were initially interested, and you will get invited to the workshop then, and if not. Okay, sorry, I just got some input that people can't ask questions, but the way to ask questions is to type them into the question panel on your GoToWebinar panel thing on the right. So let's see, maybe what all right. If there are people out there wanting to ask questions who haven't been able to, I'm going to do this as quickly as possible. Open up my so let me just show this to everybody. So this is your questions panel. This is where you want to, you might have to click on a little plus sign to open it up, and then you should be able to just type your question right in there. So hopefully everybody has a questions panel and can do that. And it may be that Judy didn't sign into, oh no, there she is. So I apologize if anybody's having a hard time typing in their questions. I hope that everybody's got the questions panel. All right, so I think given that I'm not getting any more questions right now, I'm probably going to wrap it up. Oh, I did want to point out the final thing is that if you have other questions, you can always send me an email. This right here is a link to my email, so don't hesitate to send them in if for some reason you're not able to do it right now during the webinar. And if there are questions or comments that would go to the company that's doing the studies, I will pass those along to them as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating, and I look forward to seeing what happens with this project into the future.